You are listening to the It's Your Time podcast, and I'm your host, Certified Life Coach Michelle Arnold Burke. In today's episode, I'm sharing a recent conversation with Marisa Burnett, Director of U.S. Commercial Training for Neuroscience and MedSurg at Medtronic, and we discussed the importance of embracing your internal motivators as you authentically lead. Welcome to the It's Your Time podcast, the podcast where busy professionals like you get the practical solutions and support you need to gain control of your schedule so you can strive to be the best in your career, but without the stress and overwhelm. If you're looking to increase your energy and decrease your stress, you are in the right place. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast, friends. Today, I have another exciting episode in the Multiplier Impact series. I am sharing a recent conversation that I had with Marisa Burnett. Now, Marisa is the Director of U.S. Commercial Training for Neuroscience and MedSurg at Medtronic. She is a proven sales leader with over 20 years of experiences across multiple technologies. She is, I have to say, very strategic, creative problem solver, and a huge advocate for building diverse teams and developing others. Not only at an individual level, but at a team level as well, which I think is so important. We discussed a variety of topics, including one that you might not actually expect to hear. This is the idea of not tossing your hat in the ring for promotions. What? I know most of the time we're talking about tools and concepts and how do you excel in your career. Not today. Today we discussed not tossing your hat in the ring. And I just loved her perspective on this and the importance of really embracing your internal motivators through your career. We talked about the power of authenticity and leadership. And if you can believe it, again, remember, she's the Director of Commercial Training for the world's largest medical device company. And yet, she discusses her fear of public speaking. So without further ado, please take a listen. Okay, this is going to be so much fun. Thank you for being here. Can you start by introducing yourself in a way that you feel fit? Share all the goodness.
You got it. Well, I am Marisa Burnett, which I'm still getting used to. Used to be Marisa Saladino, and that probably ties right into, I'd say, how I really define and describe myself. I've reinvented myself a number of different times. For those of you that know me, you know I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, north of Nashville. One stoplight, one Hardee's. First to graduate from college, my family. My dad had a Napa auto parts store. I majored in art, just packed up my car, moved out to LA, and got into sales and mapped my way into med device. So I've been here about 20 years, and I'm the Director of Commercial Training for the US for all of MedSurg and Neuroscience. That's who I am professionally. Personally, I'd like to say I'm still kind of a new mom. I focused on my career for a very long time, have relocated a number of times to be able to meet my professional goals. And gosh, it's been 7 years now, which is crazy, but I've been a stepmom for 7 years now. And I'm stepmom to Clara, Tess, and Jack, who are 12, 15, and 18. So that's who I am. And I'm a wife to just a fantastic partner. Joe is my husband. He runs a company, so it's been really interesting to kind of be in the I don't know, sometimes hear a little bit of a conversation of what it's like to be a CEO of a publicly traded company. That's been really interesting to me, and just really fortunate to have a great partner and someone I just really admire and adore in a number of different ways. So,
Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. It sounds like it keeps you all busy too.
keeps us busy. And but I'd also say one thing that really defines kind of our own style is I feel like sometimes we live a lot of different lives in once. So we're constantly, it's like that work-life integration piece. We're traveling, and maybe it's a fun trip, but it's also a little bit of work. But then it's calls in between. But it's time with the kids. So we're really about working as smart as we possibly can. How can we really be as efficient and effective as we possibly can? And how can we get the most out of this time that we have here? So
Oh, love that. And I was just earlier this morning reading an email from Robin Arzon, one of my Peloton favorite instructors, and she was talking about choosing your identity. So like you can be a mom, but you can also be like whatever you want to be, right? It depends on what season of life you are in, like how it is that you identify. And one title or identity does not identify you in your entirety.
yeah, I love that. And I need to start doing Peloton again. Thank you.
Yeah. You think I'm like a side hustle of a salesperson for Peloton if you listen to this.
I'll do Pilates, do Peloton. I've got it in the garage. I need to plug it in. If we're connected, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, does she even still use the thing? So anyways,
It's
Peloton.
so much,
I love it.
so much fun. And I think this conversation is going to be so much fun because we're going to touch on a number of subjects. And I think it's going to be super beneficial for people to hear your perspective because I think a lot of times, especially here, I'm talking about like going after the next promotion or ways to accomplish your goals. And today we're kind of not talking about that. Can you maybe get started by speaking to why you think it's important to consider your internal motivators and maybe not put your hat in the ring for a promotion? And maybe we even just get started with what you consider to be internal motivators.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the role that I'm in now, so previously, was a rep for many years, then a manager, joined Medtronic as a manager a year, actually, gosh, 10 years ago now, which is crazy, managing our neuroscience business. So that was DBS NeuroNav, and then I spent some time managing our spine team, and then came in house just about 3 years ago. And the reason I give that context is because what we really focus on in our training roles in America's Commercial Training Group is not really the clinical stuff. It's how do we, yes, there's selling skills, but how do we develop stronger leaders? And how do we approach our customers in different ways, right? Because we are all leaders wherever we are. There's a quote that I have a counterpart he uses all the time. I probably should know who actually has the quote, but I think it's John Maxwell. I think it's the true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And I just think that really resonates. And so we're all leaders, we're all influencing our customers to impact more patients, right? Our teams, whatever it is. So when I think about leadership at its core, if you can really tap into what are these internal motivators, that's the sweet spot. And what I mean by that is, and I'm sure you know this so well because you're a coach, we teach it as there's internal motivators and there's external motivators, right? So your external motivators are things like money and power and the picture of the Ferrari that says success underneath it, right? And then the internal ones are like really what drives you? Is it your faith? Is it loyalty? Is it your family? What is it that you really, really plug in and connect to? And what's really interesting is the internal motivators are typically a lot stronger to that individual than the external, right? So if you've ever worked with an external coach like yourself, I know one of the first questions that comes up on every single call is like, but what's really, really important to you? What drives you, right? So that's, to me, when I think about internal motivators, that's what that is. So did that answer
Yeah.
your question?
100%. And I love that that's where you kind of led it to, because I have to say, I worked with a coach, this was years ago, and her question to me was, Michelle, what do you want? And I think for so many women, like sometimes that's a hard question because we are so used to like trying to get approval and trying to do, reach for those external, I don't know, accolades, I guess. And so even when I ask people that, they're like, what? Hold on, wait, what? Like, yeah, what do you want? Like, what is important to you? Not what do you think you need to do because of, XYZ.
Yes, and I think sometimes we almost get a little bit overcoached, right? Where overdeveloped, where we feel like we've got to say this thing that we're supposed to say, right? Well, I want to be a VP GM, or I want to be a VP of sales, or and it's just like, no, like it really takes some time to figure out what it is you do want. And also that can change, I shared with you, I'm just recently, had a family, right? And it was a challenge for me because for many years in my 30s, I was trying to figure out, do we have kids? Do we not? When's the right time? We were struggling. We were struggling with infertility. We were just trying to figure out, how do we do this, and when is the right time to do this? And what I found myself at that time, I found myself actually getting a lot more excited about work. I found myself getting more excited about moving from Southern California to Boston to take on my first leadership team. And it was that gut check where I said, okay, if I'm finding myself being more excited about that, then maybe that's the path I should be taking right now.
100%. I'm so happy you shared that too, because I have to say similarly, I feel like I've been in a position where we did not end up having kids. We thought we would. And so I will often joke with, especially like my current colleague, and I'll say like, "Hey, I've been here 18 years will be July. That's my baby, right? Like maybe it's time for me to move on."
I love
Pass it
it.
on. It's now an
Empty
adult, this
nester.
territory. Exactly. But then to your point, I've also had the back and forth in my mind about like, well, people have things to say like, how are you still a rep and not a DM? And don't you want to move on? And don't you? But sometimes I'm like, I really enjoy having, the where I am right now, and not question, maybe like maybe they're right. Maybe, maybe I'm the one that's missing the point or something.
I'm so glad you said that because there are so many opinions from everybody else, right? About, well, when are you going to get married? And then when are you going to have kids? And why are you just going to have one? And,
Right.
it's amazing. And a lot of times, we, especially with our customers, because we build such strong relationships, a lot comes from that, a lot comes from our friends. And then on top of that, you compound that with your own internal critic, that's there in our heads saying all of the most wonderful, obviously I'm being sarcastic, things.
Exactly. Yes.
And it can just really be, it can be a lot, right? So I love that you call that out because there are a lot of opinions and you're just at some point, you just, again, if you can tie into what really makes you happy, to me, that's a place that I feel really good at.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I love this conversations about leadership. And I think, like you said, we've both been doing this for a while. And I'm sure you've seen a shift in leadership styles, especially because you've been at a variety of different levels yourself. And also, you interact with so many different folks in the position that you're in. Can you maybe talk about what you see as the shift? And maybe as we're talking, in the past couple of weeks, I feel like I've talked to a number of women leaders about being authentic and having empathy and kind of what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm curious, have you seen a shift in leadership here in Medtronic over the past 18 years?
Oh, for sure. Going back to the whole not having a kid, I was just telling someone this story. Like when I first started, the rep I worked with outright said, "This is not a mom job." And I think back now, I'm like, oh, that would never happen these days.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And it's, oh, that's such a great example. Yeah, you can't that's not the situation, right? That's amazing. And it's so funny. You reminded me of, I remember being a rep in Southern California at my old company, and quotas are handed out and quota adjustments are made. And I did not receive a quota adjustment. Actually, my quota went up, and my counterpart, who was a male, his quota went down, even though I've been performing and he hadn't. I'm like, well, what's going on? And I asked my manager about it, and she said, she being the keyword, which it can happen either way. She said, look, um, you know, he's the sole breadwinner. He has a family. He has this, he has that. You're 24 years old. You should be grateful that this is the compensation that you're making and the opportunity you have at this time. And at that time, I'm like, you know what? She's right. And now I look back and I'm like, man, that's just crazy. So I love that. I hate that happened, but I love that we look at that different now and we call that out and we say, that is not okay. That is not all right. So
Yeah. And I think we have to trust ourselves to be willing to also, right? Because the inner critic, we can just kind of settle and tell ourselves a story. Like it's us being intentional with the story of believing in ourselves that we are. I'm just starting this book, Worthy, by Jamie. Oh my gosh. She's the CEO, founder of It Cosmetics. And it's about the difference between self confidence and worthiness. It is so good. once I finish it, I have to tell everybody about it because I feel like it can be for women at every single level and the importance of like, yeah, knowing and calling out it's not okay.
I love it. I love it. Writing it down. Thank
Yeah.
you. And I want to hear your flip notes
Yes,
after.
I will.
Tell me.
I probably will do a short podcast on it because I do. I think it's just it's so important for us to not always like to be intentional with the stories that we're telling ourselves when we have certain situations like that come up.
I love that. And I want to double down on that internal critic piece. And I don't know if you saw this exercise, but it was, I'm not going to say who actually, well, actually, it was Monica Lewinsky. Her piece on bullying, I thought it was really interesting. And the reason I want to say that is because I don't want people to obviously bias and attach something, but just go into it thinking openly, right? So the exercise was, write down the things that cycle through your mind as an internal critic. And then what actually happened is the next day they sat across from a loved one, their partner, their best friend, their mother, whatever, and they actually had, they had to read that on camera, their internal critic, they had to read those comments to that other person. And it was brutal. I mean, they are things that you can't even have come out of your own mouth. They are the meanest things. And yet here we are. You won't even say it to your love. You won't even say it to anyone, your worst enemy. But here we are, and it is cycling through our head nonstop. So fascinating.
Oh, yeah, that is so interesting. That gives me chills. I always say, I mean, I say it jokingly kind of, but I do think like, oh my God, if people knew what was going on in here, like sometimes, right? But then I think it's important to recognize that and be aware of it because sometimes we just believe ourselves and we have to stop and be first aware of what we're saying to ourselves and then decide like also, hey, that's not okay. You cannot talk to me like that, meaning myself.
Exactly, Michelle, get it together. Exactly, Marissa. No, that is not okay. Where is that coming from? So
Yes.
I skipped over your question, so I'll bring it back to that. But leadership, authentic leadership, how it's changed. I kind of like to think about this. It goes back to a couple different themes we've talked about already. So many times, and it's not just women, it's men, it's all of us. Like we're asked, well, why do you want to be a manager? Right. And we're like, okay, I've got to, I know that's the first thing I'm going to ask. So I really have to have that answer down. And so that we rattle off this answer and we hope we're like, okay, did that work? And maybe it did, maybe it didn't, and then we get in the role and then likely we're doing all these things that the person before us, either we learned in ESLD, which hopefully was wonderful, I'm sure it was, or maybe we have a micromanager who's maybe highly analytical and we're trying to do things how they did it, right? And it's just this really interesting piece. And I think back to I'm sure you think back 18 years ago, becoming a sales rep, right? You're trying to do it this certain way. You've got these metrics, you've got to hit, you've got a field sales training, you're trying to do it their way. And then maybe about 2 years in, you start finding a way that works for you, right? You plug it in again. I know you just did string finders with Steve and your Power of Five circle. You start finding out, you're like, oh, wait, this works for me. I almost feel like I'm cheating almost. Like this feels too easy, right? Like you get into your own style. I think about that a lot with leadership. And a lot of times you just don't know who you are right off the bat. There's definitely some pieces you have to get down. You have to make sure you've got the basic management of the task, right? The cornerstone, the expense, those non-negotiables. But a lot of that, you're going to have an idea of who you are as a leader, but a lot of it's really going to come into focus. And I think too, we got some really great role models here. I look at Monty Manners. Man, if there's anybody that leads
Love her. Love
industry.
her.
Oh my God, love her. I mean, she's a great example, right? And one of my pet peeves is when I hear someone say, "Well, I've had 8 managers in 6 years," and blah blah blah, and it's like, okay, here we are, right? I honestly, I look at each manager I've had, each leader, I've learned so much from each one. And the ones that were the toughest or the ones we weren't really that aligned were the ones I learned the most from, right? Where I'm like, I am not going to do that to my team. I'm going to advocate for my team in a different way. I'm going to elevate them in a different way. So I kind of look at all of that and say, how do I really bring the best of this together? And how do I do it in a way that's authentic to who I am? And counterpart of mine, Jeff Dortch, who we recruited as a neuroscience DM, brought him into America's Commercial Training, and he's just killing it. He got asked this question the other day. I think it was on a call with all of, we're doing a special initiative with all of the endoscopy leadership team. So all of their managers and their ADs are going through it. And he was asked that question, hey, you see a change in leadership. Why is that? And this more empathetic leader. And he's like, and he called out Omar's initiative from 2020, to have 40% of women in leadership roles, and that was, gosh, I can't believe that was almost 4 years ago.
Crazy.
And Jeff said, I really feel like this is a result of that, and he said, I've learned a lot from the past two female leaders that I've had. Monty was one of them. And it was just really interesting to hear that from Jeff. And I just thought, wow, this is really cool that now we're not all looking the same way, right? And diversities, there's a number of different levels of dimensions of diversity. We all know this, right? So I just love that we're just embracing this, saying, Michelle, how would you go about this? Jeff, how would you think about this? Monty, really? You'd say that? Cool, awesome, do it. Let's see. And then she lands the plane and it's amazing, right? So to kind of put a bow on that, I just feel like the more you can really just tap into who you are, the stronger you are, right? Whether you're selling your customers, right? You're impacting more patients, you're leading your team, you're influencing others because you're that much more connected to who you are at your own core.
Oh, I love a couple things that you said, because first off, Monty, I think that is my sentence that I use. Did she just say that? Like, I love her. And I feel like she has truly been like so authentic in the past couple of years that I've gotten to know her. I'm just like in awe with her energy, and I just love her so much. And I love that you've made the connection, because I remember early on when I started as a rep, and I thought, this is Medtronic. I have to be very corporate. I have to be very serious. Like I had all of these and my manager at the time was like, Shell, you need to let people like see who you are. And I was like, oh my, no, they'll think I'm crazy. Like, what?
I know, right? They'll never want me.
Right. And I
Internal
love that
critic.
you've made the connection with leadership too, because I do still think that there's some, subconscious or maybe conscious thought about what it looks like to have to be a leader at Medtronic. And even if we look at Aspire, like me following Lauren, I'm like, hey, everyone, just so you know, I'm kind of like Kramer and Seinfeld compared to Lauren. Like she's so together and like analytical, but like that's okay. We can all make it work.
This is so wonderful. And I'll give you, oh my gosh, this is like becoming the Monty show. So I'll give you a multiplier effect of Monty, right? So I haven't known Monty that long. We both, led in spine, which out of like 62 managers, I think there were only a couple of us that were even females at the time. But she's grown up in spine, which is a whole different level. And one thing that Monty, if you met her and seen her style is just fantastic, right? And I always felt like, well, if I show up at these meetings, I have to wear a navy suit or a black suit, and it's got to look this way. And then she shows up in these frilly dresses. And so now, look, I will, if you know me, you'll know that I've really shifted my style the past couple of years, because that's okay. Tie that into an internal motivator if you want, but it's something I really enjoy doing. Like I like showing up in a certain way. I have a little fun personality. And so now when we do our Emerge and Area ESLD pilots, our classes, I've actually had a couple, women in cohort pull me aside and say, I got to tell you, now I'm dressing totally different. I'm coming. I feel like I'm more me, it's more fun. I'm engaging customers in a different way because it feels more comfortable to me. I don't feel like I've got to be like this robot, So
Yes.
I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's an out there example, but hey, it's me.
No, yeah. And I think that's so important that more people are willing to do that. Like, hey, this is me. Because back to your point, like when we first started in sales, right? And you think there's a certain thing you have to do or kind of who you're looking to. Back then, it was mostly guys. I remember I was like the only female rep in the room. So like when we can have more women talking about this and be like, hey, everyone, it's okay. Like you can do it. Like it's okay.
It's so
Right.
funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Love
And
it.
I think that leads me to another question here, because I remember meeting you when you were like on stage at Aspire, probably in your Navy suit or your Navy dress.
Probably.
And
Wasn't
I
getting dressed for sure.
yeah, and I'm always in awe of, like, all of the women who are up there because it's just such a an opportunity. But you recently said that you had a fear of public speaking, so I think that could be super helpful to talk about kind of that process for you because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who are like, "Oh, me too."
Yeah, yeah. So I had big reveal. Those closest to me know this, but I had a terrible fear of public speaking. As a rep, I was fine. I could deliver a heck of an in service. I had that down, right? But if you put me at a QBR as a manager and it started going around the room, or even if I just had to introduce myself, I would just sit there, just mortified until it got to me, which is just insane. My backstory here of why that is I never had an issue public speaking ever growing up. Growing up in the deep South, beauty pageants are a big thing. And being raised by a single parent, my father, I had to hitchhike rides to beauty pageants, I had to, find dresses at thrift shops. I didn't do that great. Let's just say that for a long time. But I it was around 1999 and I was competing for Miss Tennessee USA. It was the top five. And so I polished my pageant skills by then, and it got to the final question for the top five. And again, the crown. I mean, it's so close. And I went. What do they call it? The white room. I mean, I just blanked out. And thank goodness it wasn't recorded. You can't find it. It doesn't exist. Thank goodness. But it's. I mean, I just got asked the question, and I don't know how I probably froze for like 3 seconds, but it felt like forever. And it was that fear. And then I answered something. I don't even know if the words made sense. I mean, I just almost blacked out, And I didn't win. I got fourth runner up, so it was like last place of the top five, but still quite proud. I did get a scholarship out of it, so I'll take that.
There you go.
Woo! But it was a mortifying experience for me. And my inner critic carried that with me for a very long time. What if you're talking about something and you can't find your words? People are going to think you're stupid. And so here I am now, right? So majored in art, then managing neurosurgery reps and talking to neurosurgeons. And what do I know? I don't have this really strong clinical background. And what if I just freeze? And do I even deserve to be here? Right? Here are the thoughts in my head. So I knew as a DM, this is something I had buried in the back of my mind that I knew I had to work on. When you go to a national sales meeting, you see a sales leader on stage and they are just rocking it and they're getting everyone inspired and it's just amazing. And I just thought, I can never, I can't do this. How am I going to be able to do this? And so I started looking at Toastmasters. I started looking at, do I get an MBA? How do I do this? What's the best way? And I was part of Aspire at the time on the mentoring subcommittee. And I was always in awe of who would be on stage. Candace would do a great job. Chrissy would do a great job. Jody Weinzeitel did a great job. And I just thought I could never be on stage and do that. And the opportunity came up. And I said, if I'm ever, we call it a heat experience, right? If I'm ever going to put myself in a situation where I have to speak in front of my peers, 400 of them, right? Mostly women, and we can be a little judgmental, right? Um, if I'm ever going to have to do this and get this experience, real world, it's here, and so I did it, and I received advice in advance. Don't tell people, that you're scared. Just get up there and do it, which was totally against everything. I'd always thought under promise and over deliver, but I didn't tell anyone. And I got up there and it you gave me feedback, so I'm glad
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. It was very inspiring. I never would have guessed.
you
Yeah.
never would have guessed. So I think so how? Why? Right? So I'll share with you what worked for me. And it's not advice, take it or leave it, because it's maybe it generates an insight. But again, this is for me how I got there. So for me, it was a lot of practice. And I know everyone says, oh, well, it takes practice. Well, it actually does. There's no teleprompters, by the way, when you're there. It always looks like people have teleprompters up there. They don't. So there's a lot of practice. There's a lot of talking through the story over and over and over again. Introducing Omar, I think I had like a 3-minute long introduction to introduce him without teleprompters that I had to memorize, which I'm not great at for the mission and medallion ceremony. And he started to come up at the end. I don't know if you remember this, Michelle, but I actually like gave him the hand. I was like, not yet, because I had this grand finale like, where I wanted to say, and here representing Omar Ishrak, not only the rising man, but the rising, woman, right? So I was so excited to deliver that. And he started walking up. I'm like, not
Not
yet.
yet.
So I obviously got comfortable up there. But I would say it is a lot of the practice piece. It's a lot of talking through it. And for me now, because what I do in my role, I stand up, in front of 2 days and I lead 40 to 50 managers through sessions. I have to get really comfortable with it. A lot of it is the prep in advance of calling whoever's going to be in the room. Talk to me more about your business, right? Building relationships that way. That makes me more comfortable. So I'm entering into maybe some warmer waters, if you will. Another way, there's the visualization piece, of course, but there's also on some of these projects, I just realized there's so much more that goes into this beyond just what's happening on stage, right?
Right.
So while I was so nervous about standing up and delivering, a great introduction to Omar, there were so many other things that we had done leading up to it. I knew that that was going to be the easiest part. So I don't know, pick up the pieces wherever you are, whatever you want. You can double click on anything you want there, but hopefully there's something in there for someone to get more comfortable and being able to stand up and present.
Yeah, I think too. I also try to think about like, who am I trying to influence or help or whatever it is? Like, if I'm thinking more about them versus my fear of like my, fear of speaking or whatever it is in that moment, that sometimes I can try to think about like, okay, if I think about them, maybe I won't be so in my head about me.
And it's so funny you say that because my husband is a wonderful public speaker, and I've always asked him, well, how do you do it? And you just make it so maybe you just thought, oh, he's just really good at it. And he's like, it really is practice, and he does talk to himself quite a bit, which is kind of a riot. So I catch him doing that, but he's working through the script, and it's really fascinating to think about that. And a tip that he gave me that I tell myself every time before I go up there to present, people want you to succeed. People want, no one wants you to fail. No one's like, oh man, I really hope Michelle and Marisa crash and burn. No one wants that. No one does. They
Absolutely.
want you to get
Yeah.
up there and just nail it. So they want the best for you. The intentions are there. Just like get into it, right? So
Yeah, that's a great reminder.
yeah, if anybody who, if anyone manages to listen to this one, if they're interested in what I have to say, please reach out to me because it is something that I really love talking about and sharing.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure at the end we let people know how to connect. Have we missed anything before the final question? This has been so much fun.
You tell me. I've just really enjoyed spending the time with you. I know we've covered a lot, but hopefully it's kind of tightly woven to a theme of internal motivators, multiplying impacts. I'll just I'll tell you, we did talk about the promotion and when do you go for a promotion and when's the right time? Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be great.
Okay. So I think I'll start by sharing this is the happiest professionally I think I've ever been. There's been a lot of ups over the years, but this is just to think about the impact that we're making, right? I'm just loving that in this training capacity. And I kind of feel like for so many years, it's like, okay, well, you have every 3 years, it's like, I'm going for the next thing. I'm going for this. It's okay. Now I have to manage managers. Now now I have to go for this VP title. And it's been really tough. And even in the past year, I know I shared with you as we were talking in advance of this, there were a couple of positions I put myself into, I started chasing after, and I pulled myself out of. And it was so hard to do that because I knew I'd be great at it. I knew I'd be great for the business. I knew I'd be great for the leaders. I was so excited about it. But when I had that real gut check, going back to the internal motivators of what do I want at the end of the day? Where do I want to be? Do I want to have a little bit more flexibility over my schedule? Do I want to be able to watch my stepdaughter's lacrosse game? Do I want to be able to, go and do this? Those are the things that I'm like, that's really what's important to me right now. And that's where I'm really enjoying my time. So And it's scary, right? Because the internal critic tells you, well, now that you pulled yourself out, is anybody going to want you? You know, are you really in? Is this, oh, this is all you want to do now? Is this? Well, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
just fine. I think
Yeah.
everything's going to be just fine.
Yeah, right. We have to answer those questions. Yes, this is what I want to do. And I think Radina and I had talked about this also. Like, there are different seasons in life, right? So, like, at one point, and I think so often, I've had conversations with women about what is success and who defines that? You define that. So, like, maybe in one part of your life, it's all about career, career, career. Then it goes into, parenting or whatever it is. And it can always come back again, right? Like, you can take time away and come back. Like, the right answer is your answer.
Think about like my partner, right? CEO of small traded company. I know he'd be a wonderful CEO at a large company. I think he could be a great leader anywhere, right? But and I even kind of wonder, I'm like, how are you so like you just love what you're doing? And he's like, but the impact that I'm making here, right? And also that balance. Like if it's a huge global organization, how gone are they, right? Like, and I would also say the other part too of having two teenagers, almost three, the years are going so quickly. I mean, the fact that 7 years has been the blink of an eye is crazy to me. And then the last piece I'll share is we have a really good friend that was recently diagnosed with ALS. Had a very just amazing career where they made it on Broadway as an actor, then made it over to film, was in the Wolf of Wall Street, and everything happens, everywhere all at once. Like this just great career trajectory. And I've seen him speak a couple times, and at 47 years old, he was just out of the blue diagnosed with ALS. And he talks about, so much of his life was building the Wikipedia, building the IMDb, doing all these things. And now it's what's really important to him, right? And so it's really, his name's Aaron Lazar, if you want to look him up. It's just a really great story. And for me, that was awesome, Michelle, just to go back to that other question of, you know, what's next for you? That to me was a gut check of where do I really want to be spending my time? If I have a year or two left, where do I really want to be? And what really brings me the most joy? So,
Yeah, that's a great kind of circle back around because that's where we started with the question of what do I want, right? And that's exactly what it comes back to. I love it. Since this is multiplying your impact, this podcast, is there someone that you would say, a person or a thing, whatever you feel is appropriate, that has made the most impact in your life?
oh, wow, that's a great question. I always think back to I think it was Suzanne Foster many years ago on an MWN call that talked about this board of directors, right? And I've heard Candace use it a few times, and now it's kind of this lingo that we all use, right? And I would say yes, if I look at family, my father, just so impressive. I mean, 81 years old. I just got a Facebook memory today that it was 7 years ago that he hiked Machu Picchu with, I don't know, 10 of us Aspire girls on a
Wow.
Aspire mission trip. So how cool is that, right?
Super
Um,
cool.
so just a huge role model as far as a parent and a business owner. But I'll also say, I mean, there's been so many women here at Medtronic and men, but the ones that really stand out to me, Jody Weinzeitel for really pushing me into this Aspire role to take on the co-chair and vice chair role. Co-chair and then chair role. Again, I knew I needed to do it. I didn't think people thought I should do it. She said you'd be great at it and pushed me to do it. She was that nudge, which was so awesome. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have done it. So I
Mm.
think that's huge. And again, a lot of this comes from Aspire. Candace has become a personal friend and also a business mentor that I love bouncing ideas off of. Keely Ryan's another great one. Christy Brown. There's just so many that I just really I take these little bits and pieces from each person and I say, wow, this is really great. So I just feel really grateful and fortunate to work for an organization that offers this, right? It's just up to us to take advantage of it and pull this together. So
Oh, 100%. I was just going to say that. I think that's so important that you're taking the opportunity to take from each of them and not think that you have to be, right? That goes back to the importance of the authenticity. Like, you're not trying to model any specific one, you're taking what works for you.
yeah,
I
absolutely. I
love
love
it.
it.
How can people connect with you? Is LinkedIn the best way?
Yeah, LinkedIn is fantastic. Just if you search Marisa Burnett, again, Burnett. I'm trying to do away with the salad, so Marisa Burnett works. And then obviously here at Medtronic, you have my information.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the time. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, wasn't that so much fun? I really loved and appreciate her vulnerability that she was sharing so much information with us, and also the need for more of us to be honest about what is going on in our worlds in order for others to see it's okay. You know, I mentioned that book, Worthy, by Jamie Kern Lima, and I think I totally butchered her name in the interview, but I want to make sure that you have it because it is an amazing read so far. And one of the quotes that I love from her is, "You are not crazy. You are just first." And I think that's so important to understand that, hey, listen, in my family, I am crazy Aunt Michelle, right? That is how I am referred to. And back in the day, I for sure was not the kid that was picked for gym class. So I get that we can have points in our life where we feel like, it's just me. It's not. And I hope this conversation opened up the aperture by which you can see what is possible for you. It truly is limited by what you believe that answer to be. But first, you have to ask yourself, what is it that you actually want? And then speak to yourself in a way that allows you to accomplish that. I have to say, I love being able to have these conversations and to be able to share these amazing leaders with you. So please be sure to connect with Marisa. And as always, you can reach out to me on the socials. I love hearing from you. And listen, if you want to do some of this work, like figuring out your priorities, being able to increase your time management skills and plan your life in a way that works for you, by the way, feeling less stressed and overwhelmed and burned out along the way, go check out my self-paced coaching program, michelleburkecoaching.com/integrate. Okay, that's what I have for you today. Let's meet back here next week. But for now, make it a great day. Take care. Did you know you can take this work to a deeper level with me one-on-one? Go to michelleburkecoaching.com and click on Get Started to begin.